2 beers, please, as usual. Big thanks again. Like I say, every episode, it's been amazing to see the feedback that these type of conversations have had with you all. So thanks again for the feedback. Keep bringing in messages, keep commenting, and if we haven't went over particular things, we'll go over them again, or give us some food for thought for the future. But massive thanks once again. This week it's my turn, and the subject is visualisation. Do you believe in it? Is it a load of shit? Let's find out. Do you believe in it? Yes or no, straight away?
Yes.
Yes. I'm 50-50.
Are you really?
Well, I think...
Surprised at that.
Probably 60-40 then, if you're going to kind of push me on it. As in, I am in favour of it, but I think it's explained maybe in the wrong way to a lot of people. I think it's not really followed through properly with a lot of people. It's this whole, I think it can be on social media, visualise myself in a mansion, and I'm going to wake up one day in a minute. I think that's the kind of problem I have with it. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
So, listen, it's worked for me in the past, and I am a fan of it in that sense. But I also know it's almost limitations in the sense of, like, you can't just, write down, I want to be a millionaire, and then 10 years later you wake up and you've just won the lottery.
Have you read the book The Secret?
Yeah.
Somebody once said to me, have you read the book The Secret? And I said, what's that? That would have been about 7 or 8 years ago. And he went into describing about, obviously, what The Secret says. And I think and he said, you are living, his words to me was like, you're a living and breathing version of the book The Secret. I thought you would have read it. And I think that might come a little bit back to what you've just said. You can't read the book The Secret, which you've never read, but I can imagine now what's in it, and think, I can manufacture or artificially visualise I'm going to achieve something. But I do think more important is, if you can genuinely visualise something and you feel it in the pit of your stomach, I think there'll be some people that through fear or through, on last week's podcast, through their network saying, you can't do that, Andy. You can't break the world record. I think that there can be some people who actually have got it in them to believe and visualise to achieve something. I think that they can be put off doing it, when actually, if I look at my whole life, truth of the matter is, I saw it when I was a kid.
So do you think, without actually having read The Secret, you were living that life?
I've never heard of it. I've never read it since.
But you were living, okay, so The Secret's all about, if you can believe it, you can achieve it. That's the mantra in the book. So you've never read the book, but you've kind of grown up with this attitude of, no, I can see it, and that'll be mine one day.
Clear as a bell.
Really?
Clear as a bell.
What, as in a business or in personal or what?
Both. Many different...
Down to your wife and like...
Many different ways. My first part of the first part was when I remember being, my guess is 6, and we grew up on a housing estate where you didn't have posh cars. And how old are you?
34.
Every time I ask you that, I'm surprised by the year. Right, well, I'm 44, right? So do you remember Knight Rider?
Yeah.
Right, David Hasselhoff had Kit in Knight Rider series, and that was out when I was a kid in the 80s. And he had the car that spoke. And then Toyota brought out a Toyota Celica.
Can't wait to know where you're going with this.
Right. They brought out a Toyota Celica. I wouldn't have known this because I was about 6, but it looked like a kit car. And I remember my dad stood on the front of our house looking at this car, coming into the house and going, there's a sports car, down the road. So much so that we all left the house to go and look at this Toyota Celica, right? Which in my mind at then was the closest I've ever seen to kit. And I remember thinking, I don't understand my dad's issue here and why he's bigging this up. I'll have one of those cars. Right, I remember that dead vivid.
Like a confidence, was it?
I knew I'd have one of those cars. I subsequently then remember my dad was a lorry driver, and so in the 6-week holidays I spent all 6 weeks with him in his lorry every day. Frank Bruno was fighting Tim Witherspoon, so that would have been 1986, so I'd have been 8. I remember I used to, again, sponge off my dad. We mentioned this in the last episode. I used to just sponge off because in a whacking for 8 hours. What else can you do but ask questions? So I was always a questionable kid. And one day he was a big boxing fan, so I used to ask about Frank Bruno fighting Tim Witherspoon, Las Vegas. My dad used to speak about Las Vegas like it was, and obviously we've got a common theme that we'll run through this in a sec, but I remember thinking, what do you mean? There's like this big thing that Frank Bruno's fighting in Vegas. I used to think, as a kid, I couldn't comprehend, is it a different planet? Can't you go there? Is it, what's this thing that makes me dad think that can't happen? I thought, I'm going to go to Vegas one day. And subsequently I did, obviously, but all the way through my life. Now, when I was a kid, in my teens, that carried on. I didn't know what I was going to be. On one of my Taking Care of Business podcasts, which is the Sedulo podcast that I've got, I interviewed a guy who owns PhD Nutrition, or he sold out the protein bar business, Jason Rickybit, and he said on it, and it was the first time he'd admitted it, which kind of gave me the confidence to admit that I knew as a kid. He said, I don't say I'm better than everyone else, but I knew I was different. That was what he said to me, and it resonated with me.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I knew. Now, we'll move it on further in a little bit, but one of the things that I genuinely seen when I was a teenager was my wedding day. And I remember being at my wedding day. I just remember being at the top table, and everybody had gone out and partying. Because we act for some quite, renowned, or celebrities as you'd call them, I had a few tables of celebrities, and I had my best mates from where I grew up. And I remember there was a point where I was looking down at one of my best mates, speaking to, I won't say his name, but, a music artist who's a high-performing music artist that most people will know. And I remember thinking, I knew that would happen. And there was another girl who was there. She's in the music industry. And there was somebody else there in the sports industry. And I remember looking round and seeing my mates on the dance floor with them thinking, I've seen this when I was 10.
Wasn't a surprise to you?
No, it was like a premonition.
But I've met your wife, she's amazing, she's lovely. Did you kind of even have the type of woman you could kind of almost see the type? I mean, because people maybe who aren't into visualization could go, well, how deep do we want to go?
Well, so you obviously know who Zoe is. When I was a kid again, Baywatch came out, right? And the truth of it is, everybody fancied Pamela Anderson. But there was a girl on there called Tracy Bingham. She was the black equivalent of Pamela Anderson. That was the girl I fancied. Really? Right? And if there's a 2022 vision, 2023 division, it's weird how it's worked. And by the way, in business, I could sit and talk to you about where Sedulo's going, and I can see it visually clear as day. I can see it clear as day. And I think part of that visualization, it's got to be true, it's got to be authentic. And I said to you before, sometimes it scares me. It makes me apprehensive, it makes me nervous, because where it's going, it's changing. And with any change or any transition, there's going to be instability, risk, fear. And I think why it's important to do this podcast actually is because I think there'll be people out there that genuinely have a burning desire to, say, own a business. I'm just making that one up. In your case, we'll talk about your visualizations in a minute. If you've had them, it would be climbing a wall that before you couldn't climb, or whatever it is. I think there'll be people out there that are being held back from some of that actually is coming up again and again and again and again. And I've been quite lucky in my life that I've been able to take on head off the challenges that are going to occur between me seeing something clear as day that could be achieved, and then there being barriers to do it and thinking I'm not going to do that. And yet I've done the opposite, and I've ended up kind of living a lot of my visualization. So let's go back to you a little bit.
But can I just say on your one, that's why I do believe in visualization, because you've had that, but clearly I know you've put in a tremendous amount of work. Do you know what I mean? It's more when people say, that kind of, that's when the visualization falls away from me. When I know you and I know the person you are, yeah, I can say, yeah, he's seeing it and he's worked fucking hard to get there. It's the whole thing when there's no work going in and people think it's just their divine right that one day God's gonna. That's the only issue I have.
I don't
with
think you can visualise winning the lottery.
Yeah.
I don't think if you can't sing, you can't visualise
Yeah.
winning X Factor.
But my problem with it is, like you say, you're just going to come on to my story, that the other thing, which is a negative, which you said before, there's a bit of kind of downside to it. I think you can become obsessed with your visualization, because you've got a goal and you've got this vision and you've seen it play out and you know it's going to happen, and you can just, it can take over you. Do you know what I mean? It's all you think about.
When I've interviewed Tony Bellew, and he said, and one of the things he talks about, if you ever hear him speak, is he talks about how from the age of 15 he went around Liverpool saying, I'm going to be the world champion. I think it's one step further, and he says, I'm going to be the world champion, I'm going to win it at Goodison Park, right? So there's two things there. One, he's visualised it, but two, he gives himself the accountability. And when Floyd Mayweather says, I'm the best ever, people get annoyed by it.
Yeah.
They shouldn't get annoyed by it. Imagine how much pressure he puts on himself.
It's actually called something like, it's called like there's something effect where once you kind of tell people, there's the pressure then, the accountability. You've kind of, because if you keep an idea in your head and you don't do nothing about it, then no one will ever know. Whereas if you say, hey Andy, I'm going to do this, you're going to look silly if you don't know.
You do.
It's actually called something, yeah.
It will be. And the thing is, having the conviction for Tony to say that is it might give him that 1 or 2% he needed to do it. David Hayes, another one that I've interviewed, who I know quite well, and I remember speaking to him about losing to Carl Thompson. That was his first loss in a boxing match. And I said, how did you feel on the way back out of the ring as a loser for the first time? And he said, I just thought it was a stepping stone to being the world heavyweight champion.
Really, yeah.
And I thought, you had that belief. He said, I could see myself, and he's not the biggest lad. David Hay, I don't know what he walks around at, but he doesn't walk around like a heavyweight.
So he had that clarity straight away to think, it's...
And the minute he lost, that I think is even more clarity. The minute he lost, I said, some people crumble at that point.
It's some self-belief, that, isn't it?
He said, I knew, since I watched Rocky, I knew that I was not just going to be, because obviously he was a world cruiserweight champion before that. He knew he was going to be the heavyweight champion. And in reality, he wasn't really a heavyweight.
No.
Weirdly, he beat the biggest heavyweight champion in the history of heavyweights.
Ulev was? Or
Galotto, he was called, wasn't he? Was it Valuev?
Valuev it was.
Nikolai Valuev.
Big tall one, like 7'2" or something.
Yeah, you're right. So he was so for somebody to have that, see that vision and have that belief, I think that is a word. What comes with vision is belief. Now, when you was at the Invictus Games, I'm interested to see, when you set out, there's a gold medal at the end of it, but did you think you was going to win it?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. That's why I struggle with it, because was it... So yeah, this is why I'm a bit on the fence with it. The visions that you've said, I can totally see. I can get why you've thought them, I can get why you've achieved them, and that's great. Because my life has been, I didn't visualise getting blown up in Afghanistan. Do you know what I mean? I didn't visualise standing with one leg and a world record. That's why sometimes I'm a bit... So it's not that I don't believe in these big visualizations, but they just haven't kind of gone that way. That being said though, for the Invictus Games, I had short-term visualizations. I trained and I could see myself winning gold. I could see myself being on TV. I could see myself getting photos with my friends and family. So I had short-term visualizations. I just didn't have these 20, 30, 40-year plans. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only difference in it. And why I say then, for me, visualization can become a bit obsessive, is after the Invictus Games, my goal initially was to go to the Paralympics, but they didn't do an event in the Paralympics for someone with one leg over 10,000 metres. I think the longest distance was 400 metres. Now, I'm a realist, and at the time, Oscar Pistorius, before he went all crazy and started bloody going down that route, he was the fastest guy in the world.
Yeah.
I knew I could never, ever get to his level. And I didn't want to just turn up to take part. I thought I need to win. So I put that idea to one side. I thought there's got to be other amputees around the world who like running longer distances. Done a bit of Googling, found a guy, his name was Rick Ball. He lost his leg in a car accident and he could run 10k in 37 minutes, 53 seconds, fastest one-legged man in the world. At that point, I got a whiteboard. I remember ordering the whiteboard, got a pen, went into my garage, put the whiteboard up and I wrote 37:53, big huge letters. Then I bought a treadmill. This is how stupid it was.
Yeah.
The worst thing to do is run on a treadmill. You run out in the streets. But at the time, I was bang into the visualization. I put this treadmill right in front of this whiteboard and I just ran on this treadmill, seeing 37:53. And for everyone who's listened to the last podcast will know how I ended up breaking the record by surrounding myself by some amazing people. But from that moment when I knew about this Rick Ball and his time, I started visualizing that time. Like that time was ingrained into my brain, 37:53. And that's why I said to you, I visualized it and I knew I was going to have to beat this time and I could kind of see myself doing it. But I became obsessed with it. Obsessed. I'd tell everyone 37:53. I'm going to break this time. I want to be the fastest one-legged man in the world. So again, I believe in it and I believe it does work. But I think you have to be obsessed with it as well.
Have you ever played football and took a penalty and missed?
I played left back. I didn't take many penalties.
Did you not? That would have been an example of me where it works the other way. Where you're actually stepping up and you think, I'm going to miss this. You're almost, I'm going to miss this. The chances are you're going to miss it. You go up to a penalty or you go up to an event or you go up to do any task and you think, I'm going to make a mess of this. You're going to make a mess of it. I don't know whether, I watched something the other day on the law of attraction and they said before you have the law of attraction, you've got to understand that there's a frequency. And he was a physicist. What's a physicist where they talk about particles constantly? What's it called?
Yeah, it's physics, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's a special part. But what he talked about was, if you think you're going to do something, you're going to operate on a frequency in the universe that attracts, I don't know, let's say I looked at Tracy Bingham. I don't know how we've got onto this subject, but we have. There's probably the fact that there was an attraction and a frequency to somebody who lives in LA probably or whatever, probably meant that the more times I went in a club,
you were then
over the period of years,
subconsciously looking out for.
Subconsciously, I'm more looking for a black girl, which he ended up with. You know, and so all of a sudden it's that frequency that you're on that attracts. Whereas some people, and you can't manufacture that.
Does that come down to belief and self-belief? And it's then almost how strong your self-belief is, because people could have visions, but then just almost don't act on them, and they don't act on them because the belief isn't quite there. Where you've had this belief for your business and for your family, and maybe you've just had this self-belief and self-confidence to think, you know what, and other people have had these visions and it's just kind of been fleeting moments.
And you might have hit on something there, is that actually the end result is a look, right? So it could be the way your business looks, or the way I feel like I had a business in with me, or I feel like I could have owned that car. But if you feel like you could have owned that car, I think it strengthens the obsession or the belief that I'll do whatever it takes to get it. So I'm sure there'll be some science to what we're talking about that we don't know about, but I don't know, if you wanted, I don't know what car, I'm not that bothered about cars, but some people are really bothered about getting a Ferrari or something.
Oh, some people's visualizations are, I need to see a red Ferrari on my driveway.
But I think people can do that. I've got a client, and I won't say his name, he's another famous client, right? He drew his house when he had nothing. And the house he lives in today, it's ridiculous. Seriously, it's the house that he drew. Now, he didn't know he was going to come into contact with that house being for sale, or, you know, he's not even, he's 200 miles from where he lives, for God's sake. But what he did do was obviously had the belief that he could see something. I think the key to this podcast is there'll be other people listening that downplay what they can see. And I think that's the sad part about life, is actually, whatever it is, whether it's physics or whatever it is out there, there's stimulus to say, you could be that, I could have been that, I could have been that. And a lot of people get to 16, 17 and go, I could have, I should have maybe done this. And I think sometimes that visualisation is then, from the starting position, there's like a belief bridge.
Well, I think it's linked into last week's podcast in terms of your surroundings. If you've got these visualizations, right, and it comes into your mind, and you tell, your circle of friends or family about it, and they're like, no chance, then the kind of belief you've got for that might go one or two ways. You could become more stubborn and more determined, or it goes away, and vice versa. I think if you're surrounded by it and you get this vision and you can hold on to it, then you become obsessed by it, and it can help in a positive way. And I think it's down to, I think, visualization, obsession, and your surroundings, I think, are all so closely linked.
Yeah.
Because they can then go one way or another.
Yeah. I think the key to it is, I think I've said this 3 times now, but don't ignore them. So whether you believe in it or you don't.
What happens if you haven't got it along? Like I say, if I have, I've forgotten it. But as a kid, well, I suppose you could say I have. When I got blown up, when I lost my mum and my family kind of got disrupted, I always had an idea that I'd have a house, and like a big house, and my house would be the one that my family and friends would come to, and I'd have a big family. And I've since had those days and barbecue. So you could argue I have had long-term visions, but what do you do to someone who hasn't got a long-term vision? How do you kind of come across a kind of vision that, you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s now? How would you kind of then find the vision to say, what, in 10 years, 20 years, I want that?
Do you know what? Maybe you don't have one. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay, because I think there's people that think, I want to be rich, I want a Ferrari, I want to do this, I want to go on, I don't care, whatever it is. Actually, the key to this is you can't manufacture it, is what I think. This is my opinion. More so it's the people listening that do have a vision, that don't follow it. I think that's what's important, because I think I don't know, the guy from KFC set up KFC when he's 50. I don't know if he envisaged that when he was 18 or when he was 50.
Yeah, no, it's a nice message you're saying there. It's like, if you are one of those people who do have a vision, don't be one of those people who at 80 say, I always thought I could have done that. Grab hold of it and do something about it.
I think that is the point. I think you can't manufacture the scenario, because you genuinely believe it or you don't.
Here's one for you, because are you religious? Into.
Go on, ask me a question.
Well, because when I've heard someone describe visualization, they've said it's when they've had a vision, they've worked hard for it, and then whether God wants it or not, it's down to him. And the excuse she gave, this woman I heard, it said, so you have a bus to catch. So if you wake up in the morning and you think, you pray to God, you think, I need to catch this bus. You visualize catching the bus, but you just walk to the bus stop. The bus you're going to miss it because you've not run.
Yeah.
The other mornings you can kind of run to the bus stop, but it still goes. God never meant it to be. It's kind of, you need all three to align. She was kind of arguing, you need to visualize it, you need to work fucking hard for it, and then at the end of the day, it's whether God will allow it or not.
Yeah.
So it's whether you.
Well, I think one of the things that I always remember, the second thing that I always remember what you say that stuck with me is control the controllables. Right, so I'm big on controlling the controllables. So it's like, if I have a vision and I can see it clear as day to get there, I don't know whether I'm going to get there, but I can control all the things I'm in control of to give me the best opportunity. I can't guarantee anything. Weirdly, what I would say is the things that I've visualised over a period of time have always happened. Always.
But it's hard work, isn't it, as well? There's so much that goes on behind the scenes.
There's a million things. But sometimes you think, here's what I think is, say you visualise, I'm trying to think of something. Say you visualise winning the Invictus Gold, and you turn up, and on the starting lineup, you pull your hamstring. You've got two choices. You either still believe that you're going to win the Invictus Gold, but it's not this year, it's in 4 years. And you crack on, despite the adversity you're going to face, or you think it's not meant for me and you lose belief. And I think actually belief is quite interesting what you've said. I've always really strongly believed what I can see, we're gonna get there. But you can see why people in that incident I've just said, they might have trained for 4 years to get to Invictus, and all of a sudden they get bad luck.
Yeah.
But you have got a choice. You could say, oh, it's not aligned, God's not aligned. But how many people don't get that luck that first time, but still have the vision and the belief, so they win it the second time? Or not the second time, the third or fourth or eighth, depending on what the scenario is. I think that is the key to when you see visualization.
Do you know what the key is as well? And if there'll be people listening to this who are bang on it and go, I can give you 100 examples. And there'll be people thinking, it's a lot of shite.
Yeah.
Do you know, I think the nice positive thing to come away from it is, right, if you've got a vision for something and you work hard at it and you know you're determined and you're obsessed with it and it's a positive thing, you know, if it doesn't quite work out, you'll have a good journey, a good positive journey, and it might not be, you know, there, but you might be there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And you'll be a lot further than you were if you didn't even start.
100%.
And I think that's the thing, you know, whether you're working towards something and you can see it clear as day like you did, or whether you're someone like me who maybe these visions comes in spurts and I kind of jump on going for them, like what you said before. Not letting them pass, go for them, and you'll end up in a better place.
I think that is the key. Don't manufacture them, but when they're there, don't let somebody put you out of them. Somebody, your network, coming back to the last one, or not achieving them straight away. I honestly think people see a vision. When they don't achieve it, they think, oh,
like that was my only time to do it.
Yeah. I think the Invictus Gold is a good example. You might have won gold at your first Invictus Games. It doesn't mean that was your destiny, maybe. But somebody could have won it at the third. Do you know what I mean? Do
you know one thing for another time? Because I honestly could talk about this all day, is the idea of luck, whether you believe in it or not. Maybe that's one for another episode, but that is something I find so fascinating, you know, because it's arguably linked in a little bit with your kind of what your vision and faith and luck. I think there's some sort of.
Do you know what I
there.
think vision being kind of having that manifestation does? I think the strength of the bond of manifestation overcomes the luck you have. So you could pull your hamstring. That's fucking unlucky. But does that stop you? It can stop some people. That's unlucky. It brings luck into it. But in reality, you need luck, because the flip side of unlucky is being lucky. So the flip side of lucky is on the day you turned up to the Invictus Games, you didn't pull your hamstring. Whatever happened in the race went the way it should, and luck was on your side. But in reality, if the manifestation of what was going to happen was strong enough to believe it doesn't matter what, if David Hay gets beat in his 14th fight, some people give up. It might have been a lucky punch, might not.
That manifestation for him, though, was strong enough to
overcome. And I think that is the key. You can't pretend that you are the secret. This isn't a podcast for people that, and but today, doesn't mean you can't be 40 or 45 or 50. When you see it, though, I think you've got to take advantage. I think you've got to get on that wavelength, on that frequency, and you can't let anybody knock you off it.
No.
If you haven't got it, you don't manufacture it. If you've got it, you don't let things get in your way and stop it. That's what I think about visualization. That's how I've lived my life in that world of manifestation. I reckon it's a triangle of manifestation, belief, and visualization.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a really interesting one, and I think there'll be tons of people who are bang into it and visualise it. There'll be a couple who don't, but
yeah, I agree.
I think food for thought, I think, is...
But they just might not have seen their vision yet.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
we're not saying you sit here and... Because I think that's anti what we're saying.
Yeah.
Honestly, there's people that are like, I've been saying I'm going to win the lottery for like...
Yeah, fuck off.
25 years.
Yeah.
Right? That's not what we're saying. I think what the message from this podcast is, if you have a visualisation and you see it and you feel it with a clarity and it's authentic, then you've got to go for it.
Don't think I could have round it off any better. Let us know your thoughts on visualization. It's a fascinating one, something I could talk about all day, to be fair. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and the messages, etc. And we'll see you next week.